Hey everyone, today we're going for a drive. We're in far northern Maine, passing through the town of Ashfield, slowly making our way south. Up here there's nothing but really small little towns. I've actually been putting a lot of consideration into moving up here in the next couple of years to far northern Maine. Because around here I kind of like this area a lot, and the reasons are this area here, it's very cheap to move up here, for one, because there's not a lot of job opportunities. This area is in decline. There's a lot of available buildings, a lot of available properties, including farms, other interesting properties up here for sale at very cheap numbers. Now up here, the only things that are really going to cost you more are things like fuel, because it's a lot colder. You're going to use more fuel to heat your house up here. But areas like this are very close to the Maine wilderness. A bunch of small towns like this are right outside the Maine wilderness. So you can get to the wilderness in only a 20-minute drive. Lots of camping opportunities and stuff. And we're less than an hour away from a Walmart supercenter, so you're still fairly close to things like that. Like where I live now, I still have to drive nearly an hour to get to a place to shop. We don't have that stuff close by, even where I live now, but up here I like how it's very remote. The towns are all very small, and that Walmart I speak of, I believe, is in Press Isle, a little bit bigger of a town. I don't think you can really consider it a city, though. But up here, I think, would be a good place in a couple years, maybe, to move up here, especially in a few years, because I plan on maybe slowing down my YouTube channels, eventually retiring from YouTube and getting a job with a logging company. I think my entire life at some point, well, to some degree, I should say, I'll probably still upload videos forever, to some degree, but at a declining degree, I think, in a couple of years. I've been offered many jobs by logging companies, and I feel like that would be a good opportunity, because that's the one industry up here that's pretty dominant. Around here, this area is in great decline as far as population, because there's not many jobs. These areas have fallen a lot. Like up here, a lot of people are becoming more poor. There's a lot of properties available, like I say. So it'd be pretty easy to move up here. Because I know the property I have down south a bit has basically tripled in value, because I bought it during COVID when the prices were super low, and it was an abandoned building. I fixed it into something that could actually be sold for a good amount. Would actually pay for a good amount of property up here. I'm looking for some sort of small farm, but that has a lot of woods. And there's actually a lot of those up here. There's also a lot of off-grid houses up here too that rely on generators. There was one house I really liked up here, but I didn't like how close it was to a river. That was the only issue with it. It was a very cool setup. The property had a small solar system that ran the heating systems, blower fan and stuff, the lights, the Starlink internet. And let's say you turned on something like an electric clothes dryer, it would signal the diesel generator to help out with that power demand, which is super cool. It's solar almost all the time, except if it needs a jump in power. That's kind of a very cool system. The diesel generator almost never runs unless it needs to help out, such as charging batteries on a cloudy day, or if you're using too much power in the middle of the night when the solar can't work. That's a very good idea, because solar is very expensive, especially the batteries. But if you have a diesel generator that helps out every now and then, that actually makes the system a lot more affordable. So I do plan on that in the next few years, maybe moving far north like this. It's a lot more peaceful up here. People are a lot nicer too when you get far out in the middle of nowhere. Like it up here. Pretty nice. This area's still got a good amount of moose. My area used to. The year I moved in, actually, they took down all the moose crossing signs. We used to have those awesome signs with motion sensors. It would start flashing, warning you of moose. Every vehicle passing by would trigger a motion sensor and turn on a bunch of flashing lights. Took it all down. Every now and then I'll get a moose on my cameras, but rare. It's been a year since I've had one. I put trail cameras in the woods up here. It's full of moose. So yeah, that's my idea at some point. I want to actually move to a town that's declining in population. Because the area I'm living in now, I notice every single year it's getting built up more and more, and I don't like that. So I feel like it'd be a good idea to move to a place that's had steady decline over the past couple decades. People are moving out of these areas, not into them. I do like the cold. I'm starting to like it a little less the older I get, for a couple reasons. I noticed that I'm starting to get seasonal cramps, especially in my knees. People always tell me to lift with my knees. Well, that's the reason I can't. I've always had a degree of knee problems since a teenager, but it slowly gets worse over time. And I notice if I drive south in the winter, the pain just goes away. I do like northern Maine a lot. It doesn't get hot up here. The average temperature in the summer is only about 72 degrees. Very cool summers, but very, very frigid winters. It's only 10 degrees out tonight. We've had negatives every single night recently. We'll get down in the negatives soon. It's not that late yet. I do like the cold. I do love messing with things like wood stoves and stuff. Be cool to have a little farm with some animals and stuff. You can still grow things up here, you just don't have a big opportunity to do so. But land is very cheap up here. That's another reason. People don't want to deal with the cold. A lot of development doesn't happen up here. It's also very rocky. It's hard to develop it too, which are all pros into moving into a place like this. There's challenges that scare away most people. But then there's other states I thought about moving to, basically because of the cheap land. There's a lot of very cheap properties in places like Kentucky, but the land, it's a warmer place, but the land in most of these properties that I'm at least viewing, they're cheap for a reason, and I don't like it. The reason in those areas, all the cheap land I'm seeing is you have a flat area where the house is, but most of the property is a hill, and I don't really like that. All it takes is a forest fire, and then you can have a mudslide into the house. I look into things like that. I think an ideal property is a little farm or something. And they're very affordable in northern Maine because no one wants them. Property up here is very cheap too. And up here in Maine, I know a few people, what they do to really help out on like property taxes is they will buy a house that is on 1 acre of land. They will pay the taxes on that house. But then they have like 50 acres next to the property, but they pay separate taxes. The taxes would be huge if you have a livable building on that property, but on taxes, if they're technically two different properties, the 50 acres, honestly, in a year, the taxes are only going to be a few $100. But that would drastically increase by thousands if it was attached to the building. But if it's a separate property, even if it has outbuildings, they're not considered livable under Maine law. You're allowed to have off-grid camps and stuff. They don't count as a building. They don't count as livable. So that's a good, what's the word for it? It's not a loophole, it's literally just taking advantage of the law that exists. I know a few people that have done that. Like, there's some people, what they'll do is they'll buy up a whole bunch of lots. And there's stupid when they combine them into one, because that actually messes you up and costs you a lot on taxes. But then again, if you buy like a bunch of little lots, it's a kind of a pain in the butt. You have to pay the tax for each one every single year. Although you can combine them all into 2 properties, and that's what I think is the smartest idea. Most towns will let you do that. What do we got up here? Look at that big pile of steam. Pretty sure that's a sawmill or paper mill. All the logging industries up here. The sawmill's waste, the edges of the log they cut off when they square it into lumber, that all goes, ships off, and they have wood-burning power plants. Northern Maine, northern New Hampshire, these 2 states have the majority of their electricity is coming from wood-burning power plants. It's a good idea. They're using up the waste, stuff that would usually just get thrown away after the logging process. It's definitely some sort of sawmill. There's a gigantic paper mill down in Mexico, Maine, and when you drive by it, I don't know how the residents can stand it. Every day, whole area smells like, what's the chemical you add to natural gas so you can smell it? That whole area reeks, it kind of smells like that. I don't like it. The whole area smells like gases from the wood. I'm sniffing right now. My nose is a little clogged. This doesn't smell like that. The vapor I'm driving through right now, because that's vapor, I think. I don't think that's smoke. It smells like pine. It actually smells really good right there. Okay, there's no one around. Also up in northern Maine, they don't really care if you use off-road lights. As long as you treat it as a high beam, they don't care. But it is polite to even shut high beams off if you're going through a neighborhood. But I don't see any houses on the map. I'm using Google Maps right now. We just passed the last house that I can see. Now we're just driving through a farm. What else are we driving by? Yeah. You know, 90% of Maine is covered by woods. It's a very beautiful state. There's just nothing really here. But if you're an outdoors person, that's the best type of thing to have. It's all woods. The majority of it's owned by logging companies, which is also very good because it's very difficult to get them to sell their land. So that means it'll probably stay like that. Okay, why are we slowing down? Okay, we're going through a teeny little neighborhood. In a moment. Make that a bunch of moments. Areas like this, it's just a bunch of tiny little towns. Good to see the railroad still is active. Little towns, I mean, you look on realty websites, everything's super cheap. No one wants to move to these places. You hear about housing crises all around the country, but yet you got these dead zones like this because there's no jobs, or they're jobs that most people wouldn't want to do. Like up here, there's so many jobs associated with the logging company. I would love to do that. And in these little towns, you're less than an hour away from work, wherever you are in the logging areas. That's what's cool about that, but you gotta like logging. And a lot of isolation, and that's the thing that kills most people is the isolation. I feel that a lot when I'm out in these areas with no signal for days on end. I can see how that would get to certain people, and that's what keeps these areas from becoming populated. And the bitter cold, which most people don't like. Like there's some towns around here, you wouldn't believe it. There's buildings. Now, I'm not interested in a big building. I like a small house because I know that I'll be able to maintain it perfectly. Bigger buildings, all I see is future bankruptcy trying to keep the thing upkeep. Because the average building usually requires about 5 or 10% of its value put into it every year in upkeep. And I just don't see any point in having something like a 4-bedroom house. Like right now, I live in a 1-bedroom house, and that works for me unless I ever had kids. There's no issue with that. I don't mind living in a small house. Although, it would be nice to have a storage building. It doesn't even have to be heated. And that's the way I feel. I'm the type of person I would like to live in a small house with a ton of land. Even if I could afford a really big house, I wouldn't ever want that. It just seems pointless. It just seems like a lot of work to upkeep it, since I like to do a lot of the maintenance myself. And with a big house, every time something has an issue, if it needs a roof, if it needs a furnace, everything costs more money if it's a bigger building. And I don't like that. Like I remember I used to have stupid ideas of certain things, like buying old town hall buildings and stuff, these beautiful brick buildings. They're selling them for a super cheap price, but of course there's a catch of why it's so cheap. It probably needs $500,000 in upkeep just to get it working correctly. And the asbestos probably. That guy has one of the brightest security lights I've ever seen. He's got like a street light in his front yard. That's kind of cool. I saw on Amazon they have like a 10,000 watt light bulb. Can't imagine what kind of circuit breaker that needs. I saw some guy on YouTube hook one up in his house, and it's extremely bright. It lit up a whole neighborhood. I think it's probably meant to be like a stadium light, but Amazon sells them. They're a couple grand a piece. A single light bulb. Massive light bulbs. And I think they're incandescent or halogen, something that generates tons of heat. I don't think they have LEDs that bright. I don't know though. Probably they do, because I have these big flashlights. But to draw that kind of wattage, I don't think it's LED. And the guy mentioned it made a lot of heat. Back to what I was saying, sometimes I go on these realty websites and there's like a 4-bedroom house and it's only like $80,000, and I'm wondering what's wrong with this building. And if I contact a realtor, they tell me, well, it's because there's no jobs here. The people are desperate to sell these buildings and move out. Sometimes there's nothing even wrong with them. But a lot of those properties like that, they actually measure the yard in square feet. That's how small it is, because they're usually part of a town. Small towns measure the lots in square feet, not acreage, because something like that would probably be 1/10 of an acre, those tiny little lots. That's another thing, those houses are right up on each other. But apparently a lot of people don't mind that. You know, the majority of buildings these days are basically what they call a cookie cutter house. These massive McMansions right up on each other. And if one of them catches fire, the whole neighborhood goes down. They're made out of flammable materials like zipboard. I don't know how that material is even illegal to use. I did a video burning zipboard, and it's super flammable, and that's what makes it waterproof. It's wax all over it, glue. It's super duper flammable compared to even a wood house. It's insane that they allow that in a building. Those cookie cutter houses. And something else that amazes me is the majority of houses these days that are built are bigger than 1,800 square feet. Only 10% of homes these days being built are under that. Like my house is 700 square feet. No one builds houses like that anymore. All the houses these days being built are being built by big companies that come in, they build a whole ton of buildings at once, and they usually lease them as profit or sell them to rich people. There's not enough housing these days that are like normal houses, I would say. There's not a lot of normal houses being built anymore. Almost every house I see being built is something extravagant, and I will never understand that logic behind it. Because, you know, these days they say a average house is what? At least $300,000 to put up around here. Other parts of the country, it's $500,000. But around here, that's insane. It's because they're pretty big buildings. I remember one of my contractors I had doing something for me told me, because I asked him, if this building was ever to have something like a fire and insurance didn't cover it, what would you charge to rebuild this exact building? He told me like 115 grand. Because it's a very simple house. There's not really much to it. It doesn't have anything extravagant on it. I do want to try to move up to northern Maine, because I do see that as a better opportunity. At least for what I'm doing. I feel like it would be actually more efficient living up here in a bunch of ways. But that is my ideal property. A small house, big barn, maybe a field for animals, surrounded by woods. Completely surrounded by woods. Something like that. So I've seen a lot of other homesteaders and people on YouTube do things like that. They'll have a nice little property in the middle that's only an acre or two, and they'll own everything around it, but it's a separate property. It's taxed completely differently. Very interesting. Well, that's my personal opinions on real estate. If anyone has personal opinions they want to share, the comments are open and I'll be reading that. But there's a lot of people that have totally different opinions on that. There's a great amount of people that would rather live in a big 3,000 square foot house with no yard, just up on the neighbor's house. And I personally don't understand that. But that's their idea. I personally like having properties that are a mile away from the nearest neighbor, but with close access to a little town. But up here the land is cheap, so you can buy a decent amount of land where no one can ever build next to you. Where I live now, it's only a couple of acres, but I am surrounded by national forest, and my one neighbor owns many dozens of acres, and that one guy, he doesn't even care if I use his property. He says he doesn't care. Most of my camping videos are actually on that guy's property. I don't technically own the little stream that goes through the yard there. Maybe people could tell that or not. I don't know. I have my property line marked with the orange ribbon there. I don't know if anyone ever noticed that when I've been walking. But the stream doesn't actually enter the property anywhere. That's a little bit off. The temporary stream does, but that's more of a drainage ditch. The one that goes under my little bridge. Yeah, that's something, you know, there's tricks when you look at realty pages. There's tricks the way they word it. If you hear the word seasonal stream, seasonal creek, it means drainage ditch. Something that only flows certain times of year is not a real stream, it's drainage. Also, something else I also realized about northern Maine. Swampland, wetlands are extremely cheap to buy because you can't build on them. You can, of course, get permits to build in a wetland and fill it in, but you're going to pay a lot. But that being said, wetland is actually very cheap if it surrounds you. Now, people, when they think of a wetland, think mosquitoes. If it's a healthy environment, you might not have mosquitoes. If you have lots of tadpoles, fish, it'll take care of that. Water skimmers also eat mosquitoes. You don't have to deal about that. Just like in my property, people always mention, how do you not have mosquitoes with all these little frog ponds? Well, the baby frogs, the tadpoles. Tadpoles people think of as vegetarians, but they're actually carnivorous. They'll eat the mosquito larvae. And we get water skimmers that naturally show up because I don't use pesticides. So, no mosquitoes because of what I have already attracted to the yard, which is a predator of the mosquitoes. But yeah, wetland is actually very cheap to buy. And if you could buy something like wetland surrounding a higher hill or something that you actually have a house on, that's actually a good idea too, because that wetland will attract lots of animals. My property now is pretty wet, and that actually does attract things. It's not good as far as your foundation. You have groundwater all the time. That's not a good thing. You want to have a little elevation from the wetland, but from trial and error, I've learned what is good and what's not good to have in a property. It's good to have a water source, but it needs to be far away with a good amount of elevation, but not sudden elevation that could landslide or erode easily. You don't want that. If you are near a creek or a river, you don't want to be on the side of the creek that's digging. You want to be on the side that's slowly building land, if you know what I mean. Because creeks and rivers naturally erode in one way or another. So that's also things to look at and be prepared for. With a lot of the floods I've seen around here, I would not want to be anywhere near the major rivers. No way. I saw this wetland property the other day. It had about 15 acres for only 20-something grand, which is very cheap for the area, but there's a catch. You cannot put a structure on it. It has a camp on it, but you can't put any kind of permanent structure unless you get a special permit, which the permit is probably going to cost more than the property itself, and that's why no one wants to buy it. There's always a catch to those type of properties like that. I make vlog videos like this when I'm driving. It keeps me company. I'm talking to even the camera. I got another almost 4 hours south of driving to my area. I make these vlog videos just as records of what I'm doing. People like to hear what I'm up to, and no one's forced to watch these. I sometimes can see comments saying, boring, thumbs down, things like that. Well, just look at the name of the channel. It's called Vlogs and Extras. What is a vlog? You're literally clicking on something with a thumbnail of my hood and the road. What do you possibly expect? I don't use clickbait. Probably the only time I've ever used clickbait, and it was more of an experiment, and I got the exact reaction that I thought. A pretty angry reaction. It wasn't even technically clickbait. People just didn't understand what it was titled. It's a video titled Train Knocks Down Signal. People clicked on the video expecting to see a train probably derailing and smashing into a pole. But that term, knocking down the signal, means when the train drives by, the green signal turns to red, and the red light is below the green light. It's called knocking the signal down. That's a railroad term. It's an actual railroad term. But I got the exact reaction I thought I was going to get. And yeah, other than that, I don't use clickbait on my channels. The thumbnails are exactly what you're going to get. The titles are exactly what you're going to get. I don't clickbait anyone on these channels. Never have. Because that's not the way of doing things. If you have any kind of social media channel, you can clickbait people. You're going to get a ton of views. But those people are never going to come back after you trick them. If you post honest things, people will come back. If you lie to people, yeah, you're going to get short-term attention. People aren't going to keep coming back. I've never tried to do that. I started my YouTube channels for my own enjoyment. Nothing else. And my YouTube channels eventually became a good portion of my job. Expected that to happen. My YouTube channel was created years ago as a hobby revolving around fish tanks and stuff. That's what my first channel started as. And there's reasons it branched off in different directions, basically because I like posting random things. And I eventually found what I was good at just by posting random videos. Probably have at least 5,000 random videos out there on YouTube by this point. All kinds of different subjects. A lot of people told me for years, you gotta find one subject and just stick with it. But by not doing that, I feel like is the best thing, because a wide variety of subjects has brought a wide variety of audience. That has actually been a good thing. A large variety of subjects means that people don't get bored with what you're doing. I have different seasons. I have spring thaw, flood season, summer beaver issues. We have winter camping. Sometimes I travel and make different types of videos exploring abandoned buildings. There's a lot of seasonal things I do, and I'm always switching it up. And if I make a whole bunch of one subject video, I don't just post them all at once. I kind of mix all the seasons in. So I'll post a video from the summer. I'll post a camping video. I'll post something different. I slowly spread it out, and that's the best way of doing things, because I even will get eventually bored of making one thing. So even for myself making the videos, it's a good switch up. And for everyone who likes watching my videos, I appreciate that. And it switches it up so anyone watching doesn't get bored either. And I have tons of videos people can go back on. Again, they're not clickbait. If somebody doesn't like a certain subject, they just don't have to click on it. I hate when people complain in my videos and say things, hey, when are you going to make this kind of video? If I see that, I'll answer them and I'll tell them that, but then I'll get comments sometimes saying things like, hey, when are you going to make this sort of video? And I literally posted it the day before. Well, I'll just video was obviously made a long time ago, and then I'll have to say that it's the middle of winter or whatever. That's why I can't make fresh content. But that video has never been seen before, so what does it matter? Sometimes I'll get into the stupidest little arguments. But I'll try to reason with anyone, at least once. Most people are reasonable and are nice back. Sometimes they're not. You just gotta learn to brush that off. And I have over the years. Especially when I first started my channel, I would reply to every single comment, every single disagreement. Still do. Now these days I just tend to more ignore it. I gotta pick up my speed a little bit. Very cold out. Dipping down into the single digits right now. Sometimes you can't even tell if people got their high beams on or not with these bright LEDs. I see that in my comments sometimes, people saying that people shouldn't be allowed to have bright LEDs. I agree and I disagree. It really sucks driving my older vehicle, which has very dim halogen bulbs. And I agree that the LEDs do blind people. So what I think is, I think your normal beams, like see your normal beams, they're pretty bright, what I got right here. I think your normal beams should be a bit dimmer, but I think your high beams should be extremely bright because you shouldn't have those on when there's oncoming traffic. So that's how I'm right in the middle of that subject. I think your headlights should be dimmer. Still LED because LED doesn't burn out. They should be dimmer though. But your high beams I think should be bright because that will help you out in these rural roads. Halogen lights, in my opinion, suck. Because in my old car, they probably burn out once a year. And they're not the cheapest thing. They burn out faster when you're on bumpy logging roads and stuff. The vibrations and stuff, I guess, cause them to burn out somehow. The filament bouncing around in there. This car, I have yet to have an LED burn out, and they supposedly go a very, very long time before they burn out. They don't get hot, so that makes the plastic headlights not fade as fast. Because yes, the hot bulb does help it fade along with the sun. Not much, but it does. Definitely makes it more brittle. The LEDs in this don't get hot. The LEDs in some of my flashlights actually get extremely hot. But not the headlights. I actually really like these bright headlights. But as an oncoming driver, yes, I do agree they probably should be a little bit dimmer, but not the high beams. Because if you have high beams on, it doesn't matter if you're supposed to be shutting them off. Everyone forgets at some point. But you're supposed to flick them off. And we also got the very bright off-road light. Yeah, the off-road light is good when you're in open areas because you can see more to the left and right. Such as animals that might try to run in front of you. Animals think you're a predator, and they'll oftentimes run in front of you to try to confuse you and cut you off. And that's why you hit deer so often. They're the most likely animal to pull that. Moose, not very likely, although it did happen once this year. And I do see more moose than I do see deer. And moose, that's not a normal thing. They do it, and it's more dangerous when they do it because they're bigger, but I've only had that happen once ever, and I do encounter more moose than I do deer because I specifically go to the areas where I know they're at. So since I was a little kid, the moose population has basically been crushed into just northwestern Maine. The rest of the state, you don't see moose anymore like you did 10 years ago. And I think that's because of development in most of the southern part of the state. Driving a while today, but I'm still not tired. We drove on logging roads a lot today, which were pretty slippery. The engine's now been running 13 hours non-stop because I've been just slowly driving all day. It's so cold that I don't even shut the engine off in this sort of weather. And we're being very efficient because I wasn't driving very fast today, being very conservative with the gas pedal. I have the auxiliary tank, and right now, at this point, I've only used half the fuel I carry. And we drove a bunch last night. So, that being said, 15 hours of engine runtime, only used half of my fuel capacity. Pretty good. Idling engines don't use a lot of fuel. You also don't use a lot of fuel when you're driving slow. My average speed on the dash past 13 hours is 30 miles an hour exactly, and we've been averaging 18 mpg, which is pretty good. I usually get 18, 19 lately. Used to get like 21, but I haven't been as good, I guess, with the gas pedal. I don't think the truck's old enough to where it's starting to get inefficient yet. I know my old car, when I bought it, it used to get 32 mpg. Now it gets 24. It lost a lot of mpg due to age. Also, there's a lot more mountains up here where I moved from exactly where I bought that car. So, typically, when a car is brand new, it doesn't get its peak performance yet. The engine has to break in. The engine's very tight, which means it takes a little more energy to get it moving. The pistons are very tight when it's brand new, it breaks in. Then it gets its best fuel economy, a couple thousand miles in, supposedly. Then, when you get close to that 100,000 mile mark, it's starting to get worn out, and it's forever going to slowly get less and less efficient. At least with Toyotas. My old car got 370,000 miles on it, and it's still going strong. No ticking noises in the engine. Transmission is still shifting smooth. Everything's original except a couple wheel bearings and stuff like that. The shocks didn't even go bad, but I did shear it off. The mounting bracket I sheared off. So I had to replace it. And might as well do it as a set. So nothing extremely went bad. That's why I stick with Toyotas. They last a very long time. And then I see a Ford commercial of them bragging about going 150,000 miles. Yeah, that's nothing. But then they have old Fords that you see with 500,000 miles. It's the environmental stuff that makes vehicles less efficient. And in my opinion, if you have to keep replacing a vehicle, that's probably more energy than it's worth in efficiency. I don't know, though. I wouldn't buy a vehicle that doesn't go very far, especially with the remote places I drive. I can't afford to have a breakdown. So I only buy engine designs that go a very far distance. And reliable engines usually aren't as efficient. It seems like when you increase efficiency, you decrease reliability. That's how it seems. And unfortunately, Toyota has killed a lot of their reliable engines. The engine in this truck they killed a couple years ago. They killed all the good engines. They killed the V8 in the Tundra. Now they have an unreliable V6 that's having numerous problems. I bet they're going to have tons of issues with the new 4Runner because they switched to a 4-cylinder engine in that big vehicle. Same with the Tacoma. They switched to a 4-cylinder. They're not reliable anymore. I think their RAV4 and their sedans, I think those still have the good engine option. Environmentally, they didn't really target those vehicles because they're 4 cylinders, I think is why. Do I see a car coming up? Yep. Sometimes it's just a reflection, but no, that was a car. I do have automatic high beams, but that works horribly. I don't use it. Here's why. I have seen other people's vehicles that I've ridden in where their system works a lot better. Personally, this system here in this truck does not work great. So what it'll do is the high beam will shut off when the vehicle gets a reflection of a fluorescent sign. A reflective sign will reflect back in the vehicle. It'll shut it off because it thinks it's an oncoming vehicle. Okay, an oncoming vehicle. This truck will shut its high beam off. The oncoming vehicle will shut their high beam off. This truck will turn it back on because it can no longer detect it until the vehicle gets closer. That's why I don't use it. The automatic wipers are also garbage. I do not use that. A lot of people tell me that the lane keep assist will beep a lot when it sees tire marks in the snow. I have never had that issue. But yes, I have ridden with people that have older technology, and yes, it cannot distinguish tire marks from lines on the road. Just like right now, you see how the road's all salty? The truck can't even tell where the line is most of the time. It won't even beep. And I don't want to test it because I don't want the person behind me to think I'm drunk. There is someone behind me. They're not close though, so I don't think they want to pass. If they do get close, I'll pull over and let them pass. That's the one thing I don't like about living up north. It destroys everything. A lot of upkeep time as far as pressure washing to try to prevent rust. That's also very bad for the environment and water table. But safety's more important, I guess. At least up north here, they only salt the main arteries where you want to drive fast. They don't do it on all the back roads. They sand and put gravel down. And up here it's so cold, a lot of times the road salt doesn't even work. For road salt to work, I think it's got to be above 16 degrees, but they do have chemicals they can add to it. I forget what it's called, and it will help the salt go way down much lower. They're definitely using that chemical. The salt would not be working in these temperatures. Especially, you see the parts of the road that still appear wet. Yeah, things should not be wet with it now being 4 degrees out. Nothing should be wet. There's a chemical keeping it from freezing. The rumble strip in the middle there. Yeah, the thing didn't beep. It can't see the line. Or the sensor's just dirty, covered in salt or something. I don't know. My entire truck's looking white because of the road salt. might touch the freezing mark tomorrow, and I might pressure wash. Been wanting to try. I bought this new touch-free soap. I think it's a gimmick, but I want to give it a shot. You put it in a pressure washer foam gun. You spray it all over the vehicle after you have rinsed it. Actually, I think the advertisement, they don't even rinse it, they just foam gun it. But basically, you just wet the vehicle, foam gun the whole thing, wait 5-10 minutes, pressure wash it off. Supposedly, it's supposed to eat the grime and take it off. But I think it's a gimmick, but I want to see for myself if those commercials are a lie or not. I personally think those commercials might be a lie, I'm not sure. They might be scrubbing it down in between, not filming it, then sudsing it again to make it appear that way, but I don't know. The thing is, when you pressure wash a vehicle, it looks super clean, but when it dries, there's a layer of crud on your paint. You gotta usually have physical touch. That's why those touch-free car washes, if you're just a normal driver, they probably make your car look alright. But if you go into a touch-free car wash after being on dusty dirt roads and stuff, or having the residue of dirt, once it dries, it's not going to look very good. You got to have a car wash that's actually touching things. So we'll find out. I don't think I'll pressure wash tomorrow, but if it does happen to hit the freezing mark, I'll do it. Area right here is very beautiful. Every time I glance over at Google Maps as I'm driving, because I don't know why, Google Maps usually automatically goes into dark mode, so it's easier on your eyes. It didn't do that tonight. It's showing me satellite images still. So what we're driving through right now, it's mostly logging roads that aren't plowed. A lot of people have little camps that they only visit in the summertime up north. Usually people that live in the south will come up here to escape the heat. There's a lot of seasonal camps and stuff. A lot of RV hookups, things like that around. But other than that, the people that actually live here, there's a bunch of farms just surrounded by wilderness. I love those properties. Although, I guess that could be a bad thing. Probably need some serious electric fences to keep the bears away from whatever animals you got in your gardens. I bet we'll get robbed by a lot of creatures. For me, the worst garden enemy is the slugs. They come out of the woods non-stop. You're never going to stop them. The woods have so many slugs. They just come in mass numbers, so you're always setting poison traps for them. Other than that, the only other creature I've had destroy my gardens is a woodchuck, which I relocated quickly. And when I tried to get a permit to relocate it, they told me, just relocate it. Don't waste our time, basically is what they told me. Same with relocating squirrels. They don't even give a crap. But I moved a lot of squirrels too, because they weren't destroying my garden. They were literally chewing the house, trying to make holes to get into like the eaves of the house or the overhang. They were trying to eat into it. I think they're the reason why part of my roof has an area that's not insulated. You can see where it melts in the winter from heat loss. I think it's the squirrels that were in the roof that did that. But the squirrels were never a menace to the garden. Something else, I have a lot of voles. It's kind of like a hamster-looking creature. They would chew the tops of a bunch of carrots, but they weren't very damaging. They did not eat the green part of the carrot, so they didn't kill it. A rabbit will go eat the green part, and the carrot in the ground dies. Rabbit doesn't have any courtesy, but at least these creatures have the courtesy to eat it in a way where it doesn't kill it. And I can just bring it into the kitchen and cut the top inch of the carrot off and cook up the rest. No big deal. They never really bothered me. They're not much of a nuisance. Still, the slug was the biggest issue. And the woodchuck, but I got rid of the woodchuck very fast. I remember when I was a kid, my dad kept trying different foods for the woodchuck, and the thing that actually attracted the woodchuck the best, and I tried and it worked still. They love fruit snacks, the chewies. That attracts the woodchuck into the trap so fast. They love those. One time when I was a kid, a tractor was driving by my dad's house because there was a lot of farms around, and like a big planter of peppers, probably a couple dozen of them that they were going to go plant out in a field. It looked like the kind of plants that they would load into an automated machine that would quickly plant them. Well, a whole bunch of them fell off into the road and kind of smashed. We went out there and took them, planted them all in the yard, and right when the pepper plants got big enough to start blooming flowers, they were about to grow peppers, woodchuck goes out there and bites the base of each one. Doesn't even eat the plant, just goes and kills them all. I don't know why the woodchuck did that, but we were so mad. The woodchuck just destroyed the whole garden. Some of the peppers grew back. Dad used to put a lot of baby powder on them because that's something that irritates the woodchuck and pests. But you got to reapply every rainstorm. I haven't done that method in a while. I don't think I've ever done that method. That was just something my dad used to do and he claimed it worked. I don't know though. Right, is this car going to pass me or is he staying behind me? He's got an opportunity. I'm going to let him pass. Slowing down before my lane ends. Wow, look at the cloud of salt that guy's making. We'll let him get ahead a bit before I turn the brights back on. Northern Maine looks like summertime, even in this, looks like a winter, no, it looks like a fall map, because all the fields are brown in the farm areas, because there's just so many evergreens. Looking at the map a little further out, yeah, I don't see any city on the map, just teeny little towns. Yeah, this guy wasn't really in a hurry to pass me. I don't even think was going to pass me there. I let him by. Now I don't have to go as fast. I don't let myself become the parade leader. I like that term. Someone in my comments said that, the parade leader. When there's someone in the front going like 10 miles under the speed limit, holding up a massive line, being inconsiderate. I don't do that. Even if there's one car behind me getting kind of close, showing they want to go around me, I'll pull over. I don't want to deal with it, any road rage from anyone. I'll let anyone go around me if they want to speed. Or if I want to go under the speed limit. Like right now, I'm actually going the speed limit. I don't want to go super fast because I don't want to hit a deer. Yeah, you can still see that car up there. That guy was not in a hurry to go around me. I'm probably going to catch up to him because I think we're going through town and there's going to be a speed limit drop. I just know it. dug out the drainage ditch. This DOT knows that drainage ditch gotta work. I like how up here no one's on the roads. There's just that one other car. And it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. Usually there'd be a lot of people out if this was a city. I like the small town atmosphere like that. No one around. Or maybe there's one little restaurant in the town that'll be packed with the locals. But there's no one on the road. There's probably more deer standing in this road than cars in all the distance we just traveled. Here's the speed limit drop down to 25. That's a slow one. And I noticed that really, really small towns usually have speed limits of 25. The bigger towns, they're all 30. I guess that sign there ran out of solar power. Maybe it's too cold. It's a cute little town. Yeah, it literally only got like one actual city block, if you want to call it that. Just one square you can drive around, starting there. That sign right there is working. The one downside to a small town is all the stores close early. And usually in a small town, the gas station even closes early. You can't get 24-hour fuel in a place like this. You'd have to drive like an hour to one of the bigger towns. See it. I think even the little convenience stores, everything is closed in this town. Okay, let's stay over here. Nope, that truck's not even behind me, it just turned. Alright, speed limit's back up. I see stars. That also means maximum radiational cooling. It's gonna get cold fast. Dollar General always survives in these little towns. Fortunately, that's the store that always puts the small convenience stores out of business. And Dollar General doesn't even have great prices. I don't shop there. To me, the one time I've ever gone in there is because the Dollar Tree was closed. So I went in there, and it was actually pretty expensive. But Dollar General moves into places with a population that is too little to support something like a Walmart, but big enough for them to survive, and they'll put little tiny shops out of business. snow this year. Usually up here in far northern Maine, you'd have snow banks almost as tall as the vehicle. Look at that. Barely anything. What do we got on the ground here? A couple inches? That's nothing. Usually there'd be snow here up to your waist. This is not a snowy year. But it is a very, very cold year.